I apologize for that. My husband decided now was a good time for him to grab the vacuum cleaner, and I have one dog who doesn't like it, so that was the bark you heard that made everybody jump out of their skin. So I apologize. I've just told him he can't do what he's doing now. So, I'm grateful that I have a husband who wants to help me clean the house during this time frame, but he can put it off until 4:30 when we're done.
Okay, I think we are starting streaming. Okay, we are live. I'm just logging into the YouTube right now. And it might take a second. Okay. Okay, so there we are. Excellent. So this is the Shapeshifter Romance panel for RTC Online Romance Convention. And with us today... Sorry, I just got to mute myself on there. Sorry, tech problem. Okay, so with us today, we have A.M. Griffin, Terri Wilson, Godiva Glenn, and Marianne. I know I'm going to screw this up, so sorry. Morea or Morea? Oh.
Morea.
Morea. I'm sorry, and you told me this twice. I apologize.
No worries.
I think the first thing we'll do is we'll go through and CD Gorri. Sorry, I forgot about you as well. You're here as well with us. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. I think we'll start off with doing some introductions. And Marianne, since I got you on the screen, would you like to go first? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write and where you are right now and where you're calling in from.
I am calling in from New York. I am about 30 miles outside of New York City. And so, yep, the COVID-19 ground zero, which is New Rochelle, is even closer than the city. So it's pretty tough around here, but we're getting there. So, this is fun to be able to take my mind off of things that are happening. And I write paranormal, romantic, suspense, and urban fantasy. And I have a lot of shapeshifters, vampires, witches, fae, tons and tons of history in my stories as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. We will move over to A.M. Griffin. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? What you write?
Thank you. Hi, I'm A.M. Griffin. I am in Michigan. It's nice and sunny outside today, so I'm looking at it from my window. How outside? I'm making masks as well as we're doing this. I write sci-fi romance. I also write paranormal with wolf shifters and urban fantasy.
Fantastic. Also, if anybody, while you guys are talking, if I accidentally cut you in because there's a bit of a pause or something, just stop me and just let me know that you weren't done talking. I've got a bit of a pause going on. Terri, would you like to jump in?
Sure. I am Terri A. Wilson, and I write paranormal romance. I also write what's considered weird Western or weird weird Western, which is basically like paranormal romance, more urban fantasy, but that takes place kind of like in the Wild West time. And I also have, I write dragons and kind of like Marianne, I've got fae and witches. I don't have very many vampires, which I don't understand why, because I kind of like them. So I'm thinking I may have to change that here really soon. But I just do a lot of it of that. Plus, I do some contemporary romance, but that's been more short stories in anthologies more so than novels.
Thank you. CD, would you like to go next and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you write and where you are right now?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm CD Gorri. I'm in New Jersey right now, about 45 minutes away from New York City. I grew up in Hoboken, so that was right by New York. So I feel you, Marianne. I write paranormal romance and urban fantasy. I have all sorts of shifters from Jersey Devils to werewolves, bears, bobcats, tigers. I do have a vampire. He hasn't been a main character yet, but he will be. My creatures and characters tend to overlap. I write in one universe. And it's rainy, so I'm kind of jealous of the sun. Who was that who had sunshine? That was AM, I think.
Thank you. And last, the lovely Miss Godiva, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? Oh, you're just on.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, my hotkey wasn't working. I just like bookmarked the page a million times. All right, hello everyone. Godiva Glenn. I write paranormal romance. In a few worlds, I have my own universe of wolf shifters that are like my absolute favorite, but I also write in 2 shared worlds under Millie. So that would be PDA and the FPU, in which I have a lot of different types of shifters. I have Fae and I have more traditional ones. More recently, I did a unicorn shifter, and that seemed to be pretty popular. I kind of just go with it, and probably will expand into a lot of different ones in the future too.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got the, I lost the mute button there for a second. We could start with a question, I suppose. I'm actually curious to know from you guys, and the question I have is, what made you start writing in this genre? And what made you stay in it? And could we start with maybe, Terri, did you want to start?
Sure. I chose this genre because it's what I like to read. I like the idea of, in romance and contemporary romance, when you have like humans and you write them into a corner, you can't really, you have to figure out how to get them out in a very logical and a very normal sense. Where when you write paranormal, if you write them in a situation and you want to just change it, you can just throw a wizard in there and make a magical spell, and the whole thing changes. And so I kind of like that idea a little bit because it's more creative and more fun. I suppose the reason I stay in it is because of that same kind of thing. I like the fantasy and the creativity. It challenges me to come up with different things and that aren't necessarily the same. And I think more so than contemporary does. It's also like a way of escaping. Like I write the worlds that I want to escape to. And so that's why I do it.
I like that. CD, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Terri, I think you said it very well. I like to write what I like to read. And, absolutely. I love, fiction for that reason, that it gives us a place to escape to. I love the mythology and the folklore that goes into every single one of these stories that we like to write. It's such an integral part of the human experience, and being able to take old ideas and make them something new is very appealing to me. And it's something that I plan to do for a very long time, I hope.
Sorry, I know we did change subjects quickly, but someone just wanted to say, Jenny, I think I'm going to mess this last name, but Strouch says, "Hey, Godiva, I'm loving the wolf ears." Godiva, I'll let her know you're giving her a thumbs up. AM, would you like to let us know how you started writing in this genre and what keeps you here?
Sure. I am traditionally I am a sci-fi person, but I gravitated towards paranormal some few years back. And I actually I was really into shifters at that time, reading shifters. I'm an avid reader. So I really like that world. And I think it was Terry who said just a different world, and you're being able to change it and do what you want with it. And so that's what I liked about it. You know, I can do that with sci-fi too. And so that's what I liked about writing the shifter world. Just being able to just immerse yourself and just figure out their culture, because they have a culture, their rules, their regulations, and how they go about enforcing those rules. And also because that's what I wanted to read about. So that's why I started writing my shifters. I love it.
Awesome. How about, who haven't I asked yet? I know I'm missing somebody. CD, did I ask you yet?
Yes, I answered already.
Okay.
Me, you forgot me.
Marianne?
Yep, you forgot me. That's okay. I have I started writing in the paranormal genre simply because it's something that I fell in love with very, very early. I did a panel last week where I was telling everybody that my first entree into the world of paranormal was watching Dark Shadows as a child, the original, because I'm older than everybody here. And, you know, I was about 5 years old while my mom was sitting in the living room folding laundry, you know, back in the 1969 or 70, whatever. And watching it, and it just affected me so much, Dark Shadows, that it opened me to the world of what if. And, you know, and my imagination being what it is, you know, everybody who's creative is, you know, part crazy, part, you know, genius. Not that I'm a genius, I'm just saying, you know, there's a fine line there. But that's how I started it. And it's the world building. I mean, every author has a something that they love in their craft and something that they hate. For me, it's world building. I absolutely love creating these worlds with such depth and such substance. And the one thing I hate is I hate writing the blurbs. Oh my God, do I hate writing blurbs. But that's why I got into it, was just the what ifs of these worlds. What if they really aren't just fantasy and folklore? What if there's some truth to it and not just a way for mankind to explain away things they didn't understand? I mean, that's like, you know, that's a horrible way of explaining things. I like the whole idea of this subculture that lives, you know, parallel to us, you know, right there and hiding in plain sight. It's like, I'm getting chills just thinking about it now. So that's me.
Well, Marianne, while I still have you there, we do have a question from Kimmy Seeley. What was your hardest scene to write? We'll start with you and then we'll move to the other individuals.
Hardest scene to write. God, the hardest scene that I've ever had to write was in a vampire story. It's not a shifter story. In Blood Legacy, it was the way that one of my vampires was turned. It was very cruel and very heart-wrenching for me to write that, but it had to be done because he needed to be able to be pulled back from the precipice of darkness at some point. And in order to be pulled back from a precipice of darkness, you have to be in darkness or heading into the abyss. And so that was really hard for me to write. The other thing is killing off characters. I mean, some authors, you know, they're especially suspense authors are like, you know, I get to kill somebody, but I don't like to kill off my main characters, whether they're good, bad, or otherwise. You know, I have a revenge junkie that lives inside me. So yeah, the bad guys get what's coming to them, but I don't really like killing off characters that could otherwise not, you know, maybe live. But sometimes it just, you know, you gotta die.
It happens.
Yeah.
You gotta do what you gotta do, I guess.
Yeah.
How about A.M. Griffin? How would you, what's the hardest scene, that you have had to write so far out of all your books?
For the paranormal book, I have a paranormal book that's in my Dark Wolf Enterprises world, and it's the third book in there, and it's I believe it's Hunter claimed. The heroine in that one is Asha. She's human, very human, but she was abused when she was younger, and she was rescued by a group of vampires. They're not really the best people, um, but she was rescued by them, and in her mind, she wants to be a vampire because in her mind, no one can abuse her anymore if she's with them. So right now, she's their familiar, their assistant, and they do some horrible things to her. There's one scene where they thought that she had slighted them in front of the wolves, and so they had handcuffed her to the shower rod. So she had to stay handcuffed all day long, and she's there, and you're like, oh my God, why don't she just get some sense and leave? You know, but the hardest part was convincing myself of why she wanted to stay, because she really wanted to stay and I really wanted to, like, no, she's badass, she's gonna leave, but she's like, no, I have to do this, I have to stay here, I have to be on my tippy toes. And she's like saying, you know, to herself, if I do this, they'll turn me, they promise to turn me, and no one can ever hurt me again. And I think that's really the in some of the reviews, the readers like, why didn't she leave? So that was really hard to write. And just thinking about it is really hard too. But in the end, she does, you know, understand this is not the life that she wants, and she can still be quite human. Um, but that's not what happens. But she can still be herself, and not turn into one of these monsters. So that was really hard to write.
Wow. Terri, would you like to tell us what your hardest scene to write was?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here like listening to everybody, just like, oh my gosh, like I'm so mesmerized by all this stuff. I had my first trilogy idea. I had this one character who was a complete control freak and wanted to take care of everybody, and it had to be done, like, it wasn't so much had to be done his way, but he just needed to take care, like he just felt like responsible for everybody. And I needed something really bad to happen for him to kind of wake up and realize that, you know, he can ask for help. He can go to his family when he needs to. And so I had a character. She was a minor character, but her death was not minor. It was a huge, major thing that kind of woke him up. And when I wrote it, I was just crying at the end because I didn't want it to happen, but I kind of felt like death is like the biggest, like that's the one thing that always wakes everybody up, whether it be the death of a friend or a loved one, or, well, I mean, obviously if you are in a situation where yourself face death, maybe obviously you don't die because you're here today watching us, but so that was hard for me to do because it affected all the characters, and so I tried to put myself in their shoes, and that was hard. So.
Oh wow, that is hard. Godiva, I think you're the last one. I don't think I've asked you this question yet, have I? What's the hardest scene for you?
So my hardest scene, this is kind of hard. It's really difficult to pick one. Because I think actually probably the hardest scene that I ever wrote was in a novel that actually never even got published. And it was just a really high stakes death scene. But the thing is, so I've always kind of gone more towards the emotional side of things, so less of the physical side. There's, you know, death and torture and everything in my books, but that's not, I don't think that that's like the roughest part. I think the hardest is emotions. In Tough Shift, I have the main character is forced to sort of participate in not direct torture, but basically she has to help basically the enemy to help subdue the men that she loves. And so it's just this really intense thing where she's, you know, looking down at this guy and she has feelings for him and she has to, you know, ease his pain and tell him that he needs to basically accept the torture and accept everything that's going on with his body. And that was just very intense. And I think that I do that a lot. That's something that I shouldn't be happy to say this, but I really enjoy whenever I look through my reviews and someone's like, oh my God, I needed an entire box of tissues. So that's how I handle that, at least.
Oh, wow, that does sound intense. I think CD, have I asked you yet?
No, I'm sorry. I was having internet difficulty, so I kind of flipped out for a moment. So it's.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay now. I'm back.
We're back, okay.
I'm sorry. What was the question? It's the most difficult scene to write. Is that right?
The hardest scene that you've written.
Really interesting. I think I'm going to pick up on what Godiva was saying about the character's emotions. I think each story that we all write, has this whole unique set of circumstances. And I find it the most difficult when I have a character have to open themselves up to the other one. I mean, we're talking about, especially with shapeshifters, for me, we're talking about fated mates and this sort of soul deep connection. And to be able to portray that on the page, it takes a bit of yourself, and you have to really kind of lay a piece of your soul bare for readers. And I think that's always difficult. It's a little more abstract, it's a little bigger than just one particular scene. But for me, that's always the hardest part of writing.
I have to say hats off to all you guys though, because as a reader, I understand like the hardest scenes that you guys write are also some of the best scenes as a reader. And I really appreciate that, because I have to say, when I pull out that box of tissues, like Godiva was saying, when I pull out those box of tissues and start dabbing the eyes, you've pulled me right in there. So you guys are just pretty amazing at doing that. I actually have a question from Jenny for CD and for Godiva. It says, ladies, was it hard to put Jerry into your PDA books?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, sorry, CD, you can go first since I've got you on here.
You know what? I love Jerry so much. Millie Taden's worlds are just incredible. And I was a huge fan of hers before I ever picked up, a pen or a keyboard. And for me, it wasn't that hard because I love her and I feel like I know her. And, I was really very excited and very honored to be able to write in Millie's world. And, hopefully, I do Jerry justice in my portrayal of her. So thanks, Jenny, for the question.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's hard to put Jerry into the books because the books wouldn't exist without Jerry. So really, that's the easy part, okay? That's the easy part. I mean, you could probably just think of a funny situation for Jerry to get herself into, right? Where she meets somebody in need of a love connection and start the novel from there. And I think that, so no, the Jerry books they're actually probably the easier ones that I write, because I know that if I mess up at some point and the couple's not coming together the way they should, all I need to do is throw Jerry in there, and she's the deus ex. She just goes in and she can just smack him around and make it work when my writing has written me into a corner. So, I mean, no, it's not difficult writing Jerry. It makes it an easier job, to be honest.
Perfect. I have another question from a reader, and she's saying, hi, ladies, loving this online conference. There should be more of them. I hope so too. She'd like to ask all of you, what advice would you give a new writer starting out, specifically writing about shifters, and any pitfalls to avoid? Godiva, since you're on there, would you like to start?
Okay, so this is really hard because let me stop. The advice that I would give to writing shifters is to sit down and open a Word document and start your freaking World Bible first, okay? Because you need to know how everything's gonna go down, because readers are going to ask, okay? this is something that I get every time. I have beta readers that go with me with my wolf books, and they ask me like just the craziest questions that you wouldn't really think of, but you have to know the answer. If you want your fans to become immersed in your world, you have to be able to answer anything about it. Where did your shifters come from? When did they shift? Is shifting painful? Do they like it? Everything. You need to think about absolutely everything. And I would say do that before you really start to write, because when you start creating that world, that's where your stories are going to come from, right? Because you're not just, I mean, mine are interesting because they kind of are written in the real world. So I kind of think of it as like an alternate reality where it's basically the world as it is, but with shifters. And I think a lot of us do that. But you don't have to do it that way, right? You can do like Millie, where your shifters are out and people know that shifters exist, or you can have them in secret. But you need to know that, and you need to understand how that's going to affect all of your future plots, because the last thing you want to do is start writing a book and realize that you don't like how you've been writing your shifters so far, So get as much on the paper about the entire universe, and it's going to help everything come out more vivid. That's my general advice for shifters.
Thank you. Marianne, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with Godiva. Your world building is paramount to whether you're writing shifters or you're writing any other paranormal entity. And for the most part, your world, once you start writing in that world, and there's certain rules that are just unbreakable, that you've created as unbreakable, you have to remember them, whether it's book 1 or book 20, because your readers, if you forget them, your readers will remind you. But the one thing I can say that is great about writing in any paranormal world is that it gives you, there's always something that you can do that will give you the ability to change a rule. Maybe not break it, but bend the rules a little bit. And it's magic, because magic it's energy and it's everywhere. And in our world, since we're creating them, you can figure out where the loopholes are. You can figure out, what it is you want to do. Like, I had read where witch blood was poisonous to certain vampires. I had read that in other books. I had read that in certain folklore and so forth. And, I had the opportunity to write something like that. And I decided that I was going to bend a rule and I was going to make it where it was a roll of the dice, whether or not a vampire would die if he bit a witch. It depended on a DNA sequence and RNA sequence and yada yada. But with my shifters, like shifters and vampires are they can be friends to enemies to friends or whatever. But for the most part, in my world, they are at odds unless there's a reason for a truce. Whether their veiled world is being attacked from either without or within, like in my Cursed by Blood series. But in Taste Me, which is book 3 in my Red Veil Diaries, he was a shifter that got turned into a vampire and at his bachelor party, and ended up leaving his bride to be at the altar because he couldn't show up. And they end up running into each other again 5 years later at the Red Veil, which is the vampire club I created in New York City. And so I took something that was a rule that I had in my story, and I bent it because he still has shifter blood, even if he is a vampire right now. So that was something that became a way for me to kind of get around something that I had set up earlier in my world. So magic, it's a great key.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add? Terri? I
would just agree with what Godiva said, what Marianne said. any advice I have to any author who wants to get started is just to get started. Just go for it. Just do it. I read a meme recently that said that the only perfect draft you create is the rough draft, and that's because it's your story and it's ready to be, it's on paper, so it's ready to be perfected. So I think just do it. Just go out and write it. Keep track of your rules, keep track of your laws, and if you want to bend them, come up with ways to bend them that make sense. I mean, the whole DNA and RNA sequence, that makes sense. To just all of a sudden go, oh, well, it's a Tuesday, so if a vampire bites a witch on Tuesday, then it's okay. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So, but just go out and read a lot of them. Read everything. So that's what I would say.
Whoops. Perfect. Thank you. AM, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure. My greatest advice would be to make it yours. It's really easy to get caught up on rules that someone else has made up, and maybe that works for their story and their world. Of course, you have to follow that if you write in someone else's world, but if it's yours, make it your own. And that's what I like to do. Just make the world my own. I don't get caught up on, well, I read in so-and-so's book that this needs to happen in the shifters. It's, I just, how does it happen in my world? And my daughter, say hi. I have, you're right here. I have ants in my office, so she's been like, if you've been seeing me like doing all this, she's been helping me kill the ants. So
Good job.
good job. Okay, so just that, make it your own. And what Godiva said, make sure that you have a world Bible, because readers will know. Like, it may take us like a year or 2 years to write like 3 or 4 books, but readers are probably reading them. Like, especially if they've just found you, they're reading like all 4 books right then. And so if something is inconsistent, they know. So make a Bible, and I swear by Bibles. I don't usually have my Bible together like right before I write. I usually write and then I go back through and I'm like just picking things out and throwing them in my Bible. So I've got some pretty extensive Bibles, and if I haven't written in a series for a year, I can just go back and I can just go and look and see what the rules are. But again, my advice is to make it your own. If you want a vampire and if you want a shifter to be able to turn into a vampire, do it. Just like, do it. Like Marianne said, do it. There are some books where they're like, no, that can't happen. Well, in your world, it can happen, goddamn it. So do it. And so that's what I just say. Make it yours.
Just out of curiosity, I know all of you have talked about having a Bible, but has anybody actually started writing your script for the next book in that series and have gotten maybe 2/3 of the way, you're almost done, and then you realize, you go back to your Bible because you haven't checked it, and you realize there was a specific law, for instance, that a shifter couldn't be a vampire or vice versa, and has realized 2/3 of the way in, excited about the book, and oh crap.
Yeah, there's rules. But like some I think it was Marianne or who said magic. If you've got to make it work, then you've got to have a reason of why it works, because you said in book blah 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 that this couldn't be. So if there's a reason why it could be now, you've got to create something. And that's why I love paranormal. You can do it. You can figure it out, but you got to have a good reason as to why.
Thank you. I think CD was the last person. I don't think I asked you yet. If there's any advice that you'd like to.
I only have one word for advice, and that's to write. What everyone said here is wonderful and awesome, but you need to start writing. If that's what you want to do, if that's your calling, just write. And I know life gets in the way. It has a tendency to do that. So make time for it. Treat it like it's a job. It is a job. Do it.
Perfect.
And on that note, I just want to jump in on what CD said. It is a job. Treat it like you are a professional, whether it's you're writing word 1 of paragraph 1 of book 1. You treat this as if it is a profession and you are a professional, You make sure that you understand the mechanics of writing, you know, and
Absolutely.
follow the rules of show, don't tell, to make sure that, I mean, they say don't use ly adverbs and gerunds and blah blah blah. That stuff is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about writing coherent sentences, making sure that if you're going to head hop, that it's clear, or don't head hop at all. And the mechanics of writing is something that you need to pay attention to as much as building a world. So, or else your readers won't pick up your book if they can't get past if there's no hook at the beginning, and you don't lose the reader. They say you've got 5 seconds when you're giving somebody a pitch when you're at a convention. Well, you've got even less than that when they're looking at your cover and reading your blurb to hook a reader. So just
and
make
writing
sure
is
that,
a craft, so you need to do it. You need to practice your craft. You need
and
to
once
hone
and
it to
even
get better.
and if you think you've got it down and then you're all that, well, honey, then you've lost your edge, because writing is an ever-present evolution. You're always honing your craft. It's always something to
Exactly.
learn.
That's some great advice. Thank you, guys.
I just want to add one more thing.
By all means, go.
And I think that this is something that is hard for us to accept at first, but here's the thing. When you are writing and you're starting out as an author, don't compare yourself to everybody else. Okay? Comparison is the thief of joy. What works for one person may not work for you. And second, we are not your competition. No reader out there reads only one author. And that's why you see these things like shared worlds and, people like Millie opening up her world and not being afraid that we're trying to steal her fame or anything like that. Maybe there are some, obviously there are always going to be some bitter people out there in the world who will see you as competition and not want to help you, but just steer clear of those and accept the help of people who want to help you. And you're going to find more of those. Okay. Because like I said, we don't compete with each other. We all write in the same genre. I'm pretty sure I've shared everyone in here's books at some point. I push for them. I recommend them. You become friends. You do not become bitter competitors or anything like that. You don't need to be angry or bitter or anything. If you see somebody who's excelling at something, you can ask them how you can increase what you're doing, So just don't be afraid to ask for help. Obviously, be polite and be thankful for it. And don't ever treat anybody as an enemy just because maybe their book knocked yours out of a top 1 spot or something. This happens. We do this to each other all the time. And we're still friends, Just don't let the competitiveness of it. Don't let the numbers, the ranks and everything, don't let it get to you. Just keep going and be friendly.
Thank you. That's some fantastic advice. I got to take that myself. I have, just to bring this back to shifters, I have a question from one of the readers. How do you guys decide how your shifter character will shift? That is, with or without clothes, and is fated mates in your universe? Does CD, you seem to be on my screen right now. Would you like to start?
Hi. Okay, so for me, I decided on shifters shifting without clothes on because it just seemed like the natural thing to do. You're going from one shape to the next. It didn't, I couldn't figure out a way where that would work for me. If I have a 200-pound man turning into a 900-pound polar bear, how's he going to keep a shirt on? So for me, it just made sense that he would be, naked when he was finished shifting back. And I'm sorry, what was the second half of that question?
Is fated mates in your universe?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have loads of fated mate stories. I believe in destiny. I believe in soulmates. And I think that also made sense in my universe and my world. I know plenty of authors do it, whether it's paranormal romance or not. And it just really made sense to me. And I like the certainty that I'm going to get a happy ever after. And I like to give my readers the same certainty.
Fair enough. Marianne, would you like to answer that? How do you decide how shifters are going to shift in your universe?
Well, I have more than one series, and the Bible that I write for one series doesn't necessarily carry over into the Bible for the next series. So, but I do write a lot in Howell's romance, and Howell's romance is shifters, any kind of shifters in any kind of way. But my world in Howell's romance that I just put out, it just released, it's called The Wolf's Secret Witch. I have them where they have petty theft because they shift, and their clothes just kind of shred, and they steal sneakers off of back porches, and if people have clothing hanging on clotheslines, they will take them and then replace them very, very clandestinely replace them because they're not going to steal. Or they have a backpack, hidden certain places because, hey, you never know. So, that's how I do it in my series. But for the most part, I think if I have to think about it, yeah, they're little naked noodles there. They don't, they don't shift and then all of a sudden can manifest clothing, just not part of the magic. That doesn't mean that I won't bend the rules at some point and make it in some way, shape, or form. I do have witches. They can just bestow upon them whatever they want. So
zap some clothes on.
Yeah, exactly.
AM, would you like to answer that one? How do you decide how your shifters are going to shift without clothes? Or
I have mine. They shift without clothes. But I have read a book where they shift with their clothes on, and they shift into the animal, and then when they shift back to human, they have their clothes on, and they were explained away as magic. And I was just like, okay, well, that's magic. As a reader, you just if the writer makes it believable, then you just go with it. So either way is fine with me. I find I'm just an easy person. But I do have fated mates in my books, and the 3 in the Dark Wolf Enterprises, the 3 shifters have made it with humans, and so for the shifters, there's not an automatic, but it's just like when it hits them, it's like boom, this is my mate. But for the humans, they're like, whoa, you're just moving way too fast, so it doesn't work. The humans obviously have to fall in love because they are humans, and so that's what the books are about. The shifters are kind of just like trying to convince them that they are fated. Like in the first book, Shifter claimed he's the CEO. He's a multimillionaire. He's like he's the pack leader, and he's mating. His fated mate is a human, and he's like doing all he can just to not be with her. Like he's trying to send her away at every chance he can, because he's like, she's way too weak. But she proves that, she's an accountant. And so she proves like she can handle her own. But yeah, I love shifters.
I love that. I kind of feel like I can relate with some of your shifters trying to really prove that we're fated.
Yeah.
Terri, would you like to answer the question? And how do your shifters decide to shift?
Well, they don't have their clothes are often shredded in emergency situations. I do have some U.S. Marshals that carry go bags with them when they're out in the field, so they always have a change of clothes afterwards. And in fact, it's part of their protocol is to not shift unless it's an absolute emergency, because they're always around people like humans who aren't prepared for that. So that's part of their protocol, is to not shift unless they absolutely have to. Like Anne was saying, I have one human who fell in love with the shifter, and I have another one coming up. But she actually, when the shifter, because I have fated mates too, and he said, you're my mate, we're going to get together, we're going to do this. And she said, no, I don't know. We're going to walk on. I don't want you. We're going to walk away. And of course, they end up being together. But when she did her first transformation, she fought it so much that she actually had trouble shifting back to being a human.
Oh,
because
wow.
she just couldn't handle that. She got sick, and it was really bad. She couldn't handle it because she was fighting that. I don't want to be in this position, even though I know I feel this love and I feel very strongly about this. It still goes against what I have always felt.
Right.
So I love the idea of fated mates. It just is, I think it's just fun. But I also, none of my fated mates have accepted it. Even the shifters, they're always kind of like, okay, whatever, because that helps to create the tension. So I don't think I've had any of them that just been like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, let's go. So
I suppose you wouldn't have a book if that was the case, right?
yeah, it might be like 20 pages. They met, they mated, the end.
They had a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Godiva, how do your shifters shift? How do you write that, with or without clothes, or?
So yeah, no, mine are like everybody else's, where they'll rip through their clothes. I think my shifters are a little bit different in that my shifters actually have 3 forms, or at least my wolf shifters do. So they have a human form, they have a wolf form, and then they have a lupine form, which is somewhat in the middle, and it's larger than their human form. So there's no way they'd be able to, keep their clothes on. But my wolves are also capable of shifting individual parts. There's a lot of rituals where they'll just shift their like their hands, for example, like if they're fighting, like if they're doing like a duel for somebody's honor or something like that. And that's usually how they'll do it. They won't do it in a full shifted form. So yeah, clothing is kind of optional at that point.
So they can partially shift then.
Yeah, they can partially shift. And there are, there's jokes there. There are a lot of jokes there. But as far
mind.
Yeah. As far as fated mates, I think that I guess my PDA books, the ones that I write in the PDA world, which would be the only ones that would count as fated mates. And that's because that's following Millie's way of writing shifters, where they know their mates on site. My own shifters don't. My wolves don't have fated mates. They struggle and they have to deal with that uncertainty, and sometimes they choose wrong. But I see the merit in both ways, and I know that some readers only want to read one or the other, but it's honestly quite easy to write both, and they each have their own difficulties, because some people think that if you write fated mates, it's like, oh, it's too easy, right? Because one of them or both of them, they know that it's meant to be. But it's like, that's not how it is. I mean, most of us, even if something's gonna happen or has to happen, it doesn't mean you can't fight it. So it doesn't mean there can't be tension. It adds a different level of complexity to the writing process, whether it's fated or not. So I write both. Seems fine.
Do you like any one better than the other? Like, would you rather them be fated, or would you rather them be not fated and have to work harder?
So I really like bringing together people who don't like each other. So I actually prefer if I had to choose, I would say I wouldn't want to write the fated mates. I like writing the ones who don't want to be together, and maybe they don't want to, maybe they don't want a soulmate at all. Maybe they think that that's just not in the cards for them. And I think that introducing love into someone's life when they feel like that they're not worthy of it or that they'll never find it has a different feel than someone who knows that they have a mate somewhere out in the world, if that makes sense.
No, that totally does. Thank you guys for answering that one. I've got another question from someone on the chat. This one's actually kind of interesting. What shifter would you like to write about but haven't yet? Godiva, I'll start with you since you're already on my screen.
Okay. I have a ton of shifters that I want to write that I haven't written yet. And it's honestly just a matter of time constraints, to be honest. We all have our schedules. And forever ago, I introduced a skunk shifter, and I just have not gotten around to writing that story yet. But I really want to. I think it's going to be fun. And it's probably going to be pretty, I mean, it's probably going to be a one of the humor-filled stories that I write, which I don't always write humor, but when I do, it's in PDA. It's in the PDA world, and it's usually a specific blend of sarcasm and witty one-liners, which is pretty much as far as my humor goes. I'm looking forward to the skunk shifter. Yeah.
A skunk shifter. That's one I haven't read yet either. I'd love to read that. Terri, would you like to jump in? What shifter have you not written about yet, but would love to?
Well, I actually mentioned in one story, like 2 sentences about this character. I would love to do an octopus shifter. I have a coastal town that's actually based off of Morro Bay, California. And I would love to have an octopus shifter who helps to guard the town, but, you know, in the water. So.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. How about AM? Is there a shifter that you haven't written about that you would love to write about or are dying to write about?
No, actually, I don't. I like I like my wolves. I like reading other shifters. I think it was Godiva who said that she has a unicorn shifter. So I think I'm gonna, was that you, Godiva? I think I'm gonna pick that up. I like reading about all the other shifters, but yeah.
You're stuck with the wolves.
Yeah, right now.
Sounds good. Marianne, would you like to let us know, was there any shifter that you're dying to write that you haven't written about yet?
Well, no, I have. I have big cats. I have dragons. I have leviathans. My latest howls is taming their tail fins. And I didn't answer the question before about fated mates. And you know, in my howls romances, they are fated, but in my other series, they are not. Just like what Godiva was saying. And they kind of, something happens, like they'll either get a you know, a tattoo, no, not a tattoo, but a symbol will show up on their arm or in some part of their body, as almost like it's a claiming of some kind, until they actually have their formal claiming. And if you think it's tough with fated mates when it's just, well, you know, 2 entities, try doing it with menage or more. You know, it's a little harder, you know, to get people to wrap their heads around, wait a minute, you're my mate, but you too, you know. So anyway, but the answer is no. The closest thing that I think I'll get to is in my book, Lion's Den. I introduce selkies, you know, and which are seal shifters. They were off Bodega Bay in California, and that they're very ancient and so forth. But my deal is that I have to find the animal magnificent. I have to find the animal sleek and sexy and just dangerous, but in a enthralling, enchanting, oh my God, captivating way. And certain shifters don't do it for me. You know, it's like, you know, it's like, you know, and if you do it in a humorous way, like what Godiva was saying about skunks, yeah, I could see that being hilarious, absolutely hilarious. I mean, think about PU at a very critical moment, you know, but you know, for me, it's just, no, you know, dragons are ferocious and so forth. And, you know, I just, like, I couldn't do it with a bird shifter. It's like, birds are just kind of like, you know, caw, you know, it's just, no. So, no, I'll stick with my sleek, sexy, magnificent creatures. So,
The non-caca kind.
yeah, non-caca. So, bye.
Someone just mentioned if anybody's interested in alligator shifter, they'd love to read that. So just throwing that out there to you guys. I know we're running out of time, but I have one question I'm dying to sort of ask you guys from me. I'm just curious. How has the genre changed in the past 5 years from your perspective? I mean, all of you have been writing in it for a while and are pretty entrenched in this particular genre. How has that changed? Do you want to start off, Marianne? You're on my screen.
I don't know. I mean, in the authors that I read and in the worlds that I participate in, other than the introduction of these odd paranormals, the less than mainstream paranormals, that's really the only thing that I've seen that's changed in the terms of the way that authors sell their books. That's also changed in the last 5 years. I mean, you see a ton of anthologies out there where authors are banding together to try and get more exposure. Because if you get 20 authors together putting together an anthology they're selling for 99 cents, obviously you're not in it for the money, you're in it for the exposure and to have to reach a higher readership and for people to understand, to get an introduction to your book so that maybe they'll go and they'll pick up the other ones that aren't 99 cents. In terms of the genre itself, I haven't seen anything other than the odd paranormals being introduced.
Okay, thank you. CD, I just forgot that I missed you on the last round of questions. So if you'd like to let us know what shifter you haven't written yet but are dying to, and you can go ahead. And also if there's any insight into how the genre has changed in the last 5 years, we'd love to hear anything.
So I pretty much write everything I want to. That's one of the perks of this job, that I get to basically pick my next project. And, I have 2 books now. One is out, one isn't yet, on Jersey Shifters, Jersey Devil Shifter, I'm sorry. And I really loved writing these characters. So I think I might be taking a look at more mythological creatures like Jersey Shifter, like Pegasus, like a unicorn, as Godiva wrote, just because it was fun. It was a lot of fun to write. I think Marianne was right in the way that people are selling books. Tons of anthologies out there. Insofar as how the genre itself changed, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. You see new tropes coming up. There's a whole prison reform sort of thing happening now in paranormal romance.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of people are coming out with these prison reform books, and Academy books are really big. But other than that, I think, we have some really good, strong types that we like to stick with. I know, for me, it'll be shifters. It'll always be shifters.
I find that over the last couple of years, I've just noticed a lot of worlds have come out, and people are allowing a lot of anthologies, like you guys have just mentioned already, that are coming out with that I didn't see about 5 or 6 years ago when I started reading the genre. But it's interesting. And do you have anything to add of how the genre has shifted in the last 5 years, or if it has anything new?
I don't have anything to add, just what these ladies have said.
Okay, fair enough. Terri, anything?
I've only been writing for 3 years. I mean, I haven't really seen much of this happen in 3 years. I guess, well, maybe one thing I'm seeing more maybe the last 6-8 months, but it could just be because I'm just looking for it more, but just different animals, not so much the wolves, but you get a unicorn or, the honey badgers, or, someone's want an alligator or a gorilla. I know there's a book out there now that has a gorilla that's a shifter. So I see a little bit more of that, but it could have been there and I just didn't know about it before. So
I agree with you on that. I've seen a lot of different animals too as well over the last couple of years. You're completely right about that. Godiva, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think, and I mean, this could just be my perception, but I feel like the covers have changed for a large part, and especially because paranormal is kind of branching out, because I mean, it did seem to kind of stem out of werewolves and vampires, but then everything new started coming, and I feel like all the covers are different now. And so that's an interesting one, and especially because I'm still kind of in the abs category, and the romance authors tend to be divided on this, where some of them are like, no, you can't sell books with abs, you need this or you need that, and I'm just like, my wolves are just stubbornly sitting there with just full frontal man display. but even that's like kind of fading out, you know. A lot of the wolf shifter books no longer do the abs with a wolf, which, you know, so it's just kind of constantly changing depending, I guess, on what readers want. So, but as far as everything else, I think what everybody else said, you know.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
good with abs.
All right. Well then, CB, let's start with you. What are you currently working on that you'd like everyone to hear about?
Okay, well, I have a new Sassy Ever After book coming out in one of Millie Taden's worlds next month, Breaking Sass. So I'm just on my final draft of that. I'm kind of excited.
Excellent. Let's move over to Marianne. What are you currently working on?
I was invited to write in Robin Peterman's Magic and Mayhem world, her universe, and I am just probably about 10,000 words left in the book that I have to write that's coming out in June. It's called Big Girls Don't Scry. So, and I don't know if you know anything about Robin Peterman's world, but it's, you know, it's a witches and their whole, and she's just hysterical, and you know it's you know, my work tends to be very dark, so it's kind of been an exercise in really kind of reining that in, but it's been fun. It's a little different in the sense that I haven't written it in Robin's town, and and my characters really don't interact with her characters. It's really just kind of that they're mentioned, and you know that they're people that they've known in the past, and you know, what would Zelda think about this? And you know, Zelda buys my character her wedding gown, you know, so because it's a wedding, and and I also have I'm launching hopefully over the summer a new pen name for Cozy Mysteries. So I will be writing Cozy Mysteries under Marianne Danbury, and they'll be witchy as well. I just can't get away from the paranormal. I've tried, believe me, but the brain just goes whoop, right that way. And I also have a Fae series. The first book in the Fae series and its prequel will be available at Literary Love, which is a convention I'll be going to in July, and Orlando Reads Books. Hopefully, fingers crossed, they're the only ones that are left that haven't been canceled for the year. But we'll see. If not, they're coming out regardless of whether I do them there, in paperback or in ebook. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, my writing plate is pretty full for 2020. So,
a lot of exciting things coming up for you. It's wonderful. Yep. AM, how about you? What are you up to right now? What are you writing?
I am working on the 4th book of my sci-fi series, The Hunt. I'm writing a story with the heroine she's abducted from Earth, and she's transported to an alien planet where she has to survive, as there's hunters after her, alien hunters, and she's the only one with kids who were taken with her. So I'm writing that one, and I'm also rewriting my the first book in my urban fantasy series, the Guaikai Talisman, and that's the Undercity Chronicles of Babylonia Jones series. So I'm finding it hard to write though in these times. So I'm just going back and forth between them, and I just don't know. It's April, almost May, so I thought, the 4th book would have been out by now, but it's been a really, really slow process. So I have no clue when these books are going to come out.
Not a problem. We'll check back on your website then to see when they come out. We'll all stay tuned.
Yes.
How about Terri? Up next, what are you working on currently?
Well, at the moment, I'm kind of caught up with everything. I have one story. My first PDA actually for Millie Taden's World is at the editors right now. And so I'm hoping that I'll get that back any day now and be able to get that out before the end of the month. And I will be going back to my Weird Western series and working on that. And I have a ton of ideas, but kind of like what AM was saying, it's really slow. My writing's really slow these days, so I'm not 100% sure when everything is going to come out. But it's there. It's just getting it from here to on my keyboard. So
understandable. It's quite an interesting time we're living in right now. Godiva, how about yourself? What are you working on right now?
I have a few projects that are in process right now. One of them is a wolf shifter book that's it's scheduled to go into a collection of other wolf shifters that's going to be coming. Well, I guess just paranormal and shifters that's coming out in the fall. So I've been doing that. I've already I've gone through my reader group and I let them vote on the names. So they picked out the names for my characters this week. So that was fun. Other than that, I have a dragon release coming very later in this year in the PDA world with Marianne and Ophelia Bell.
Oh, wow.
And aside from that, my top project right now is actually a dark romance, which I'm going to be starting a different name for, but it's going to still be tied to me. It's just going to have a different name because it's a long story. Readers don't care. Algorithms, you know. But it's a dark romance with the underworld. So it's going to be like Hades, but it's also going to be angels and demons and kind of mixing some mythologies. I'm really looking forward to it. I started it years and years and years ago, and I've picked it up and have decided that this is the year that it's going to come out. And I already bought the covers and they're gorgeous and I'm super excited, but I don't know when it's going to happen because like everybody else, everything that's going on recently has definitely changed my writing vibe. And it is very hard to kind of get into like the dark and sexy mood when I'm too anxious to even go out and buy groceries. So, you know, I know that I feel bad for readers because I think when everything started happening, I think a lot of readers thought that there was like the silver lining to all of this was that all of the authors are forced to stay home and what else are they going to do right? And it's like, that's not what's happening. For some of us, yeah, I've seen people getting these amazing word counts recently. Good for them. I'm not. I'm like, I'm a ball of nerves. It's very hard, but I'm trying.
I think we all are right now, so you're not the only one. So I just want to let you guys all know that I was reading through some of the comments as well, and everyone on there so far wants to say thank you so much to all of you for your writings, for your books. Paranormal is their favorite genre, and they are grateful that you guys continue to do what you love so that they can read the books from the genre they love. So hats off to you all. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us here today, because I know that a lot of people are very grateful that RTC was able to do this. And special thank you to Jess Ripley as well. Thank you so much for putting this on for us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.